Following the last video, wanted to make a addendum with the prior comment with Shingal. And shout out to him. He has a great channel. I would definitely recommend anyone that's listening to me to look to definitely take the time out to listen to the insight he has to share relating to these topics. And with that, I'll reference one of his videos relating to this subject of solutions to the matter with existence to the video description. And with any video I put, you'll see some other person set of people with these similar mindsets that I have on those video descriptions. So a lot of other great material if you would want to get into. But with this topic of solutions, this initial point, it might sound a bit corny, but I come from the sense that we should first see that there's an understanding with knowing that you're already part of the solution. So it wouldn't even matter too if you're, say, one to procreate, of course, with us, ones that would abstain, that we're all part of that end game to finish what this is here. And, you know, with that going to the law of entropy, we should, in a sense, be comforted by the fact that this too shall pass. Basically, how I see it with caring to even mention any of this spiel with antinatalism, efilism, we're just seeing the destruction already going on. You know, we're just trying to be like, all right, well, we don't have to be a part of it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to place any one of our loved ones in this mess. So it's kind of just, for how I see it, waving the flag, letting anyone that can see it know that we're basically saying you can exit stage left, and those that have the ear to hear, the eyes to see that, will proceed with caution with the clear points that we're mentioning. So that's how I see it. And again, whether you want to be on the flip end, shout out to Shingal again with the distinction between entropy and negative entropy. With negative entropy, basically, you're looking to maintain the state of the world for how we see things to be for however often, for however long that we can. Whether you're someone like that, right? You want to promote the world, you want to procreate and all that. It's only further leading to more destruction. There's a term called accelerationism, and I've seen a sentiment with that topic, and it's a great topic, kind of similar to this essence of what can we do to basically get to that process quicker for that final stage of entropy playing itself out. Again, the sentiment I've heard was, well, you know, again, we're trying to accelerate it. Well, let's place more of our own here that, you know, it would lead in an understanding towards more destruction. When you're adding more creation, it will lead to more destruction. But I just want to make a point to that sentiment I have heard with that topic of accelerationism, that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes getting so over analytical and fixed with the rationality and logic of things, we forget that, you know, the term sentient beings, feeling beings, we want to definitely still be anchored by our wisdom and not get too far-fetched in thinking that that makes ethical sense, which is the context that I'm looking to address. Because we don't live for rationality. We live for our feelings. We live to feel good. You know, the rationality is a tool. And so we should definitely be sure to understand that. It's kind of crazy to think that, oh, I should, you know, think about being a son or daughter to whoever, and that's your purpose, that they would tell you that, you know, you're here to further lead to the annihilation of the world. And that's kind of hardcore, kind of cool when I think about it. But again, we're trying to prevent suffering. And so while, again, this is already going to end, it's just, as we know here, it takes time. That's how this existence works. We're just trying to ease in the pains along the way. That's all this is. But again, we live for the emotions. We live for our feelings. Rationality is the subservient to it. And there's a metaphysical principle to this, being that with the entropy, the chaos, this is of a feminine element, feminine dealing with that conventional sense around emotions and feelings. We see that with us men. We chase, you can say ass, we chase women, you know what I mean? So that feminine underlining component, it's clear as day, it's there. This is why I say, in a clear sense, it really starts with these topics, antinatalism, efilism, from that emotional caring component, that this is first considering looking to nurture, you can say in an odd way, the unborn. You're trying to preserve that. So it is of a feminine quality that we're starting at with this type of subject. Yes, the rationality is understanding the reasoning for why we don't want to place people to have to go through this process of birth and death. But again, it starts with the love. It starts with the care. It starts for feeling with what you have to go through in this bullshit. You know what I mean? So it's that feminine baseline, and then from there we're using the masculine, the rationality aspect to do what we can in the midst of this case that we find ourselves in. So again, we're just helping those along the way that have the ability to hear the message for what we have to say. But for another way to say it, do know soft, right? The feminine, the chaotic will overcome this hard, such said masculine order that we find ourselves in. And just going further with that logic basic of things, and how if we're trying to have a solution of, in this case, you can say trying to collaborate with other people, it's not ultimately going to work out. Just generally, we understand the concept that most people won't agree with most people, right? So if for whatever solution I or anyone can look to come up in this regard, it's going to be a very lower end scale if it's going to be a solution that's revolving around anyone outside of yourself. It reminds me of the one show, Squid Games, from the last season. They had ending the show, forgot the main character's name, but that dude, throughout the show for the different seasons, he was trying to get everybody to know, like, hey, we don't have to die here, i.e. we don't have to place our future lineage to have to die in this existence, that there's an exit, that there's a safe haven. We can exit the game. We don't have to go through this process. But like, I'm sure that's a pretty popular TV series that you see those people on the show, right? Just like people in existence. Basically, the similar essence is that they are compulsive gamblers, that no matter what truth you may tell them, they're going to do what they are already wanting to do. So to end the show, sorry to spoil it for anyone that may have not watched it by now, but if that's the case, you probably don't fuck with it that much anyway. That main character, he died basically as a martyr, you can say, in that essence. And for another point, when it comes to any such said solutions, already again, knowing that you're already part of it, but in with being a part of the solution, you should understand, recognize, and acknowledge the fact that you should, be sure you are standing up for what you are about. And that is within your own accord, with this whole element of dying of like a martyr. That's within your own terms and conditions. I'm not saying you need to do X, Y, or Z. Just generally speaking, you should definitely be sure you are standing up for what you're about. And with where I'm at currently, with what I'm about and what I can look to say, especially onto other people, being in this case caring enough to even have a channel and making these different points to other people. I come from the angle when it comes to these solutions, different offerings of resolutions, that we get very fixated on, given that term solutions, you would think you got to do, right? So that there's something external to be done. And I'm not saying that's not the case. That's not plausibility. I'm just saying I'm coming from myself from the angle of, we can clearly see in this topic of antinatalism, especially not necessarily efilism in this case, that we are to do less, for a clear, direct thing that every one of us has the ability to, quote unquote, technically not do is, with abstaining from procreation, for the, again, caring element of that preservation for the unborn. It shows that fact of actually it's a bit of an inverse principle effect that we are, again, doing too much, rather, that we should do less when it comes to the caring element, to the ethical concern at play. But yeah, in terms of this talk, especially this is definitely getting into the efilism realm, more so than antinatalism when it comes to the solutions. The matter with existence, I'm not going to tell somebody to do something that I'm not doing. Okay, so we've, of course, I've heard with this type of topic, and you've seen in the news, right? It was a story earlier in the year. There's been another past account or whatever of whoever that's, basically trying to kill other people in the name of efilism. Again, I'm not going to tell somebody to do something that I'm not doing. And I'm not doing that. I have no feature of looking to orchestrate any of that. You know what I mean? So I don't even have to say any 2 cents to anyone that wants to do any such said thing that I just mentioned in the name of. Giving my 2 cents is redundant. It's not relevant. You know what I mean? People are going to do what they already do. I don't need to put my sense to it. So again, I'm just not one to look to talk to others about doing something that I'm not doing. And then another type of point I've seen about with this efilism talk is that, the whole red button, whatever atomic, some type of nuclear bomb, to look to do that, right? But again, with these topics, antinatalism, especially efilism, it's starting with an understanding how, in essence, there's no need to create need, And so, again, in this case, with any such said bomb of any sort or what, I'm not helping of any collaboration to that. I'm of no pedigree of any science credentials to be able to do such a thing. I am not investing myself in that. You know my point? So especially, of course, in that element, I'm not going to tell people to do that when I'm not in any respect, adding to such a cause. But I definitely get it. We're here now, and, for those of us that are of this mindset, and I can definitely appreciate the mentality of doing what you can, looking to further strive for seeking different ways that can further get this place just closed up and turn the fuck out with the lights turned off, because there's a lot of harm going on. So there's definitely that feeling of wanting to end the existence within your time here in the existence. But again, you should understand that this all here will clearly not likely end on man's own will, that there are greater forces at play, and that's the entropy element, and we're just a cog in it. So with being a cog in the law of entropy, do what's in your lane, do what you feel compelled to do. That's all that we can do. There was this one episode of the Boondocks, going to another TV reference, shout out to Granddad. This was the episode, he was doing a strike on BET. On the end of the episode, he was telling his granddad, he had a question. He was like, "Granddad, what can you do when you can't do nothing, but there's nothing you can do?" And when I look back on that quote, I'm like, damn, even that question is a deep question, talking about you can't do nothing, you can't hear in this something of an existence, obtain nothingness currently, right? But at the same time, there's nothing you can do. So it's kind of like a play on words. But to that question, Huey posed to his granddad. His granddad said, "You do what you can." And again, that's all that we're doing. That's all that we're contemplating on doing more. And again, shout out to Shingal. He had a great tip for this part of the solution, I can say, that I'm about for sure. Once he relayed this in one of the past streams he did with Mark, I was like, man, yeah, this for where I'm at is definitely up my alley. And it's something I'm definitely about, and would encourage anyone that's also about it to definitely look to do it with meditation, putting your awareness on the vibration of the annihilation of the world. However you see that to be, to, again, place your awareness on that energy to just further that point of things getting permeated to this existence here. Because when it comes to any such solutions, like I was telling you about from before, the difference with the metaphysical element of feminine and masculine, we kind of have to get in that, again, chaotic feminine sense. Things aren't going to make sense. You're getting into that area of things is that potent source, again, with the masculine, this world, it's all a byproduct from that internal, right? So getting more to that internal is what I'm all about. So when I heard that recommendation from Shingal, I was definitely like, wow, that makes too much sense. So, I'm thinking about possibly in the future having some form of live streams consistently where there's just meditation going on, nothing more than that. So the more the better for anyone that would like to join in. I'll put posts up if that's something I would look to do. But again, just going within oneself, focusing on the internal, what was before any of this external. I definitely see that as beneficial, because when it comes to these things, it's more than what meets the eye. And with this idea of meditation and going within one's mind, another TV reference, but it reminded me of a show of Three Body Problem, another series I would recommend anyone to watch. They only had one season currently up, and on the last episode of that, they're basically, to describe the context to the show, there's this alien invasion going on, this alien group of people or whatever entities, they have this so-far technology, and basically where they are currently staying at, it's running its time up, and that alien community, they are trying to migrate, and they are wanting to come here to planet Earth. Initially, they were going to want to cohabitate with us, but then they figure out in the show that humans lie. So they're kind of like, okay, well, fuck you guys. We're just going to overtake what you have here. And so because of that, once we were put privy to that fact, our human civilization in the show, you'll see they come up with this group of Wallfacers, and it's only 3 people that are basically tasked to save humanity, and those here. One of the members, they're like a military general. There's this other person that's a Wallfacer that I believe they're like a heroic professor that helped some destabilization of ISIS in the show. And then the third person for one of the main characters of the show is Saul. And he's another very successful person in his own element. He's a physicist, they mentioned, from Oxford. And you got to understand, with this alien group, they have this, again, so-far technology. And with that, basically, there's no privacy that whatever meeting, any conversation, even the memories of any computer, such device we have here, they can seep into any of it. They can peep anything that's going on, right? So this reminded me of the concept of whether you want to say Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, that, right, is controlling this universe. With any of these shows, you should be able, again, shout out to Shengo, to peep the mythology that's being played out. And with mythology, it's just telling that hero's journey, Heru. So it's getting into the fact of the Christ element of things, that you should see with the Christ crystals, the light within yourself. You should be able to see the light that they're trying to kind of connect you with these different forms of entertainment, if you have the eye to see. But again, that's so fun technology, just because of how crazy they are with it. For the strategy of these Wallfacers, even for the term they mentioned for Wallfacers, it comes from the ancient Buddhist name for meditators. And the strategy they were looking to use to defeat this alien invasion that was coming up was to go within those minds of the Wallfacers, to just, really prioritize going within oneself. That at a certain time later down the line for the show, they were going to then come to execute whatever they can physically. But again, it started with going in internally. And I just connect that back with what I mentioned prior, with the emphasis I place personally, shout out to Shengo, with meditation. With that, you go within yourself, and from there you can do whatever. And in this clear sense, for the betterment of the unborn, preserving their quote unquote sovereignty, we're looking to, continue the annihilation of this place to prevent any further suffering that could have had been. And with going within one's mind, it's, again, getting into that chaotic, feminine creativity element, where it's not going to, necessarily be hardcore, straight up logic, with any of that, per se, part of the solution with meditating on the annihilation of the world. But again, we're subjectivity beings. We got to use our intuition. We got to use our feelings, in a sense, right? The rationality is just a kind of compass within that. Because again, with the rationality, the logic of things, it's only going to go so far. There's just, like I mentioned, greater forces at play that's above us. And to think that our intelligence comes from a non-intelligence, it's a bit arrogant to really think like that. So again, just do what you can. None of this, ultimately, though, at the same breath, is our responsibility. None of us deserves any of this that's going on. So please don't think that you have to have the world on your shoulders. Ultimately, that's just us doing that to ourselves. And even on the show, Three Body Problem, Saul, he didn't want to be a Wallfacer. When he was presented that being a Wallfacer, he was like, I'm not trying to do this. Fuck this. I didn't ask for this, right? And they told him in the show that, hey, you're free to go. And he's like, all right. He walks out of the building, and then he gets sniped the fuck down. So while I can say that none of us deserve any of this, it's not ultimately our responsibility. Again, we do what we can, though. We still got to do the work that's placed for us to be able to do. You can say that it's not much, but there's a significance to it. Kind of similar in this video with the topic of solutions. With this conversation, there's many people that will say that this is all futile, and you can understand where they're coming from. But again, I come from the sense of we're just trying to preserve the unborn. So we're not trying to place people to be in harm's way, before this end of the game kind of happens with that law of entropy. We're just trying to help people out along the way. We are just traveling across this cosmos, per se, and we are here. We're noticing the brutality, and it's like, well, damn, just as an act of service. It's the least I can do. If there's anything that I would care to say, it would be relating to this. So with those different points, of course, just going to those quick points of course, you don't want to procreate. Those around you in your proximity, your loved ones, they should be able to hear you out. You should be telling them of these different type of things. I mean, it's crazy that we look to be so secluded from one another when it comes to these very important points. When people say, oh, I don't want to talk politics or religion, with those that I value. Well, then that means you don't value them in a clear sense in this accord. And that's unfortunate. That doesn't make sense because these are things that are affecting them and people that they can affect. So again, not procreating, talking to this type of matter with those that are within your proximity, that are your loved ones. If they love you, they would understand where you are coming from with this type of topic of antinatalism. You don't even really need to go as far as efilism with those type of people in your everyday life. Another point, again, shout out to Shengo, is the meditation on the annihilation of the universe for the preservation of the unborn. And whatever else that you may feel compelled to do, do that. Those are just a few that I'm about. And any one of us should be about. I'm, again, not going to tell somebody to do something that I'm not doing. I come from the baseline that there is that baseline of things that no matter who you are, we can all settle on. So that's the mantra. You do what you can. And, with this topic of solutions, there's those of some that will look to contemplate with this idea of, again, trying to annihilate the world. With that, there's people that have the sentiment of not wanting to come back, don't want to return back here, the soul trap theory, reincarnation, people looking to inquire more upon how they're even here, right? I come from the sense I'm just trying to kind of ease in any such anxiety of anyone listening to this that also has that sentiment to things that, again, if you're placing yourself within that nothingness, you are, placing yourself to meditate on whatever amount of frequency that you can do, however often, with those prior stated points given. Just focus on that, those prior topics of reincarnation, soul trap, those are basically those still beliefs. And so we know, again, that there's more than what meets the eye. And we know that our mind is temporal, it's going to come and go. So there's no point in even bothering with such set of contemplation of reincarnation, any soul trap theory. From how I see things, y'all can let me know what you know, put me privy, but from how I've come to see those different type of questions, it's pretty redundant. You wouldn't know the least anyway. I'm going to reference in the video description SQS. He had a video going on the rebirth, reannihilation of things, just to hopefully make further points in that understanding that it's not you that is going to return back. It's a whole other whatever being. So it's not you, right? And so this kind of ties into the fact of abiogenesis. Well, if consciousness were to basically just arise back, similar to that generic subjective continuity, if this game comes back around and arises, then we'll fight the good fight again, is all I have to say to that. I mean, it is what it is. There's, again, more forces above us that are, but regardless, within the midst of things, we are going to do the right thing. What we see as that right thing, we will do. You know what I mean? And for those of us listening to this, right, we don't want to promote harm unnecessarily for no reason. So that's the right thing that we see, and even those on the flip end, like I mentioned before, we're all playing in this game that's leading to the eventual demise of the game. So, you do what you can. And from where we see things, from how I can see it. And please, again, if there's any such set tips you guys have, you can let me know that I may have not already included. I'm who am I? I'm just letting people know what I'm about, where I've seen things. But from how I can see it, it's going to, pass the baton to the next generation for where we see ourselves in this current timeline. So putting this type of message out there for the ripple effect it can cause, is only going to help such said later generations further this cause. And it's going to be on their court from that point. Because like I mentioned from the past video, once you take the true morality out and quote unquote true morality, you get my point, the ethics of the matter. I don't know what other type of morality outside of this type of thought other people have. I wouldn't consider, that's why I try to separate ethical. Like, for really probing your moral code, it would be this. Like, let's just cut the shit. So given that, for those future generations, we trying to help them out, you get my point? Because once you take the true morality out, it's only going to get worse. You know what I'm saying? Already we see it. Just fucking, this is why people don't want to read the news and see all the catastrophe that's going on, So things are already getting much worse, you know what I mean? Let humans have at it. This shit, it's not going to take much long in a certain sense.